Hi, Giovanni here at Fraptools, and today we're gonna take a look at some FM sound design tips for the BRENSO. We already pushed the BRENSO in an unfamiliar territory by playing with the PWM and the flip sync in another video that I will link here and in the description, but we all know that probably the key feature of the BRENSO oscillator is the triangle core thru-zero linear frequency modulation. We already shot a couple of Frap talks on linear and exponential FM that I will link as well. And since we received some requests, I thought that it could be nice to just do a brief video of just patching with and messing around with the FM. So I would like to start by patching my external CV and gate to the 333 so that I can have multiple copies of them. And I'm gonna start by patching the CV to the yellow generator and the yellow sine wave to our channel here. The first thing that I can choose is if I want to use the integrator, which gives me to pass the CV from the yellow oscillator to the green one, or if I want to externally duplicate, like I just did, the CV. And I think that I'm gonna start with this option, which is slightly more accurate, at least on paper, since we have the same exact CV going to both oscillators without passing through an integrator, which as fast as it can go, it is still something between this signal and this one. I think in most of the case you won't even realize it's there, but the proper way of sharing CV between the carrier and the modulator is through a buffered multiple like the 333. So now I have the exact signal going through both oscillators, and if I raise the deviation amount and with the thru-zero linear FM attenuator up, I can already hear that my green oscillator, my modulator, is out of tune. There. So basically the tip number one is choose how you want to control your carrier and your modulator. FM synthesis can be very complex, but I think that in the analog domain with fairly small structure with just two oscillators, I think that we can obtain a wide variety of sounds by just focusing on two parameters, the modulator frequency and the deviation amount. Don't forget also the fact that FM was born for recreating the complex audio spectra, the evolution of sound footprint from the attack to the release, and the evolution of its timbre. For example, when you strike a key on the piano or we play a note on a trumpet, we perceive a variation in how in the very harmonic content from the beginning to the end. And this suggests us that the key to mastering the FM synthesis is the modulation that we apply to the two parameters, the modulator index or the deviation amount on the BRENSO and the carrier or the modulator frequency. So let's start. As you can see, if I start with a consonant interval, I can obtain a sound that reminds me of a low-pass filter. So if I patch my gate to an envelope, I can use this envelope to change my deviation amount, like this. And by tuning the oscillator lower, can obtain this very growly FM bass. I can take advantage of Falistris semi-normalization to patch the integrated copy of the yellow oscillator to control the amplitude here. And playing with just the CV amount, the modulation over this parameter here gives me this very snappy sound. But I can play with the duration and shape of this envelope to make it more snappy, and I can even remove the gate and make almost like knocking on wood. I can reach very extreme effects like this, but it might be a little bit too much. I can even add a slight offset to the modulation so that the FM doesn't go all the way to 0. Now the carrier and the modulator are in unison, but I can tune them to different intervals. Like this. Listen how different it becomes by just inverting the envelope shape. It's a complete different thing. If I play at a higher register, it becomes a very soothing lead with almost perhaps like a clarinet or an oboe. And I can go back to a sustained envelope. I'd like to use another integrator to integrate my CV coming from the external controller, like this. And we haven't changed the ratio, just played a little bit with the amount and with the envelope that shapes our timbre. Since we are using this very slow attack, I can demonstrate, we can pay attention to the other parameter, like the carrier and the modulator's frequency. Because so far we've been using consonant intervals like this, but I can use a dissonant interval like this. For the classic, the more classic glass sound. And here I think I can dare to increase the modulation amount a little bit and bring in some extra high frequencies. And we can even transpose our carrier at this point. See that when it gets back in tune, it doesn't have the same magic, the same idea of striking a glass, or stroking a glass. For this kind of sound, we may even dare to use the exponential FM, which gives us absolutely atonal sounds. Slightly mellower, because we are losing a huge deal of overtones. I like the fact that the feature of exponential FM, as opposed to linear FM, that by modulating the deviation amount, we obtain a sort of sound. You hear? Perhaps with a longer tail and with a bigger modulation. And it changes for every note. So with faster scales, we have this sort of which we cannot obtain on the linear FM, because the linear FM sounds good, so to speak. And this is a feature, and it is due to the change in the average frequency between the lowest and the highest peaks by changing the modulation amount. This can be possible only with exponential FM, because it's exponential. So as we reduce the modulation amount, the deviation amount, we also reduce the average frequency between. And this is why we perceive this pitch drift going down, because you can perceive that the pitch go up if I increase the modulation, and it returns down. So keep this in mind if you want to have an atonal sound with a pitch drifting up or down. The exponential FM is what you need. Since we are talking about non-integer ratios, another famous FM sound is the bell sound, which follows the same approach of, it's basically the same as the glass, but with slightly different settings. So we need fast envelope, because we are striking the bell, and we can use exponential or linear FM. We need a very slow tone, very low tone, and an instant transient envelope. And then we just play with the modulation amount. This is reasonable. Play with the envelope shape, give it the more scooped. My advice for this kind of bell sounds is to use a very slow decay on the envelope, a very slow release, or a very slow fall setting. A slower amplitude setting. And also a very, very tiny modulation amount. Because otherwise it would be very easy to overdo it and have very unrealistic bells, especially in the lower register. And then you can just choose by ear the frequency that you are that you like the most. Feel free to stop the video here and take a screenshot of these settings on the BRENSO and start experimenting from here. Since we talked about modulation, we can also modulate the carrier and the modulator. And something that I like to do quite often is use a copy of my keyboard gate. Nice. A copy of my keyboard gate to trig sapel and use the n+1 output, which doubles the frequency, to change this oscillator pitch. Now this is one of those cases where I want to use the integrator so that I can use a precise volt per octave signal to change this oscillator's pitch, while at the same time changing its pitch through the volt per octave signal. And now I am generating a new octave every time I strike a key. You can appreciate the variety of sounds that I can create like this. And if I play at a higher register, like right now, I can even choose a different ratio, and I can generate a different timbre every time I strike a key. But it will still retain some of the flavor of the original timbre, which is this one. Because it will just double its frequency, so it will keep the same ratio. It can almost create the sound of, mallet or percussion. But perhaps with a little bit more modulation. This is like when you strike the piece of wood in different points, And finally, another thing that we can do is modulate this frequency with another envelope to create like a purposeful detune. Let's see. Since I no longer need to control my frequency with a specific ratio, I can use the envelope and patch it straight to the modulation, to the exponential FM. See? Or I can even change it. That's it for the first tips on FM, but more will come. We may start talking about cross modulation and get more towards how to make more noise with the BRENSO. So stay in touch. See you next time.